Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is the lies that Kate Forbes is putting out about child poverty. Now, I say that with no great happiness because Kate Forbes was one of less than a handful of SNP MSPs that I actually thought didn't tell lies. Okay? And when we consider that Kate isn't obviously very Christian in her beliefs and should know better than to tell lies, I become more concerned as to what's going on here. Because this is a woman that up until very recently I actually had a lot of faith in and a wee bit of respect for, if I'm perfectly honest. I thought she would have been a better First Minister when she competed with Hamza Yousaf to be the leader of the SNP. But particularly over the last couple of 3 weeks, my thoughts are moving south. And I don't like to say that because I don't think she's an inherently bad person, but I think she's caught up in a gang that is despicable and it's starting to bear fruit on her. Now, what actually I took umbrage with was 3 days ago. She put out a little video on her Twitter feed, which is still there just now, which says under the SNP, almost 100,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. And then goes on, there's a little video, and it says, a vote for the SNP is a vote for game-changing policies which make a difference to families across Scotland every day. So my first thing was, this £100,000 kids in poverty line has now been changed yet again, right? And let me explain. The first time I heard it mentioned was Hamza Yousaf, who told us that this new £5 a week benefit to children in Scotland had lifted 100,000 kids from poverty. Then, through the course of a few weeks and months, his version became, it will lift 100,000. It's expected to lift. Words like that. So it went from it's happened to it will happen, right? And now we've got Kate Forbes going back to the claim that it has happened. And it's changed from 100,000 to almost 100,000. And I think at one point it was over 100,000. So, we're changing the narrative. Changing the detail on this fable more and again, right? So that's where I was. For some time, I've had this concern about this 100,000, the poverty children line that's, been spouted by the SNP for quite some time. So that's always been there in my head. And why does it keep changing, right? Then I see Kate Forbes very publicly going down this same line 3 days ago. And I've always had a thought, how can you manage? How can you say that? How do you justify that? What metrics do you use to gauge if this is A, true, or B, false, or are the figures right? And yesterday, I came across a document by the Scottish Government on ScotGov's own website, there for everyone to see. And it is a full report on poverty as a whole, not just children. However, there is a section there that discusses children. Now, if my IT skills are a little bit better, I'd put up a screenshot, but for some reason the program that I use, sniping tool, isn't working, right? So I'll try and do that in the edit, but I might not have that up on the screen just now. That's just because I'm not so clever at IT. But I'll put a link in the comments below so that anyone can go and see it. So in this whole report, which is quite a substantial report, it covers a lot of different topics under the banner poverty. But there is a subsection on child poverty. And although it is confusing, the numbers are quite simple. They have two graphs, one for relative poverty and one for absolute poverty. I don't know the difference between the two. I'll read their definition out to you. But both show poverty in children has risen last year. So we're actually creating more kids into poverty, not removing them. So this narrative is a complete lie. And I would challenge Kate Forbes to remove the lie from her publicly published post on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, from the 3rd of June, because it is a lie. And I expect better from someone who portrays herself as the common sense of the party and the Christian in the party. Christians don't tell lies. Now, you may have made a mistake. That's a different thing. Making a mistake is a mistake. But now, if you're aware that you've made a mistake, it is therefore a lie. So please stop doing it, and please remove the post that you posted on the 3rd of June and stop referring to this nonsense. Because the relative poverty graph says, definition, a proportion of children living in households with equivalised incomes below 60% of the median UK income in the current year. Before the year 21 to 22, that was at 23%. For 22 into 23, which are the figures just been released, it's 26%. As went up 3% out of 23, over 10% in the 1 year. Now, quite a startling fact is, if we go back to 2011/12, when the SNP were in charge, I think Alex Salmond would have been the First Minister, that figure was 19%. So since this crusade started, you've actually seen more children in poverty. It went from 19 to 26%. That's an increase of 7%, which is over a third. You've created more than a third kids into poverty when we look at the ratios as a percentage than when you started this crusade in 2011. Now, we can look at absolute poverty, which is a slightly different way to read it. The definition is a proportion of children living in households with equivalised incomes below 60% of the median UK income in 2010. So it's started and adjusted for inflation. So it's saying this is where we were then. Where are we now in relation to 2010? And in 2010 and 11, we were at 21 in 2010, and we went into 2011, 2012, that came down to 20%. So before you started your crusade that you actually were having a positive effect, that figure last year was 19%, and this year is 23%. So irrespective if you want to use the relative poverty or the absolute poverty, now I don't know which one's the best, right? I'm not a specialist in statistics. But regardless of what one you want to use, both show increases in child poverty in a report that covers the whole question of poverty. So, yet again, we have SNP MSPs telling us lies. This one is particularly worrying on a couple of reasons. First reason is this one is the deputy leader of the SNP, and this one is Kate Forbes, who is a Christian and should know better. And as I say, I don't have any, doesn't give me any great happiness telling you this, but it's disappointing me because I had Kate Forbes as the ray of hope in their party. And I thought Kate Forbes might be the deputy leader and might go in and make a difference. But Kate Forbes is telling us lies like the rest of them. And that is disappointing. So there we go, folks. Stop believing the lies that the SNP constantly tell us, and even the most trustworthy within their party are now not so trustworthy. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. But most importantly of all, unless you're SNP, what's left of the remaining cult members, and indeed now including Kate Forbes, everyone else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.